So today we're looking at basic algebra. Hey, and all it is you're solving for an unknown. And you've always been doing that. I mean, even if I wrote this down and said, what's 3 plus 4? I don't know what that is. If we put a variable in there, any letter, x is commonly used. 3 plus 4 equals x. What's x equal? We know x equals 7 by doing 3 plus 4. So where we're going to start is taking words and putting them in algebraic equations. So if I said something like 3 plus x equals 7 and said write it out as an algebraic equation, we would do, 3 plus x equals 7. If it said something like 5 divided by y equals 3 or something like that, you would write this out as 5 divided by y, or 5 over y, equals 3. If it said something like 3 multiplied by a equals 27, you can write that two ways: 3 times a, like that, 27, or the correct algebra way is to write 3a equals 27. If a number is right next to a variable, that means multiply it together. Okay. So how do we solve these equations? And we're going to start with simple equations, and later in the course we'll go into more complicated. But let's say we did have something. We had something like 25 minus x equals 15. And let's say we had 25 plus x equals 35. Okay, there's two algebraic equations, one with a plus, one with a minus. Let's start with the one with a plus. What you want to do in an algebraic equation is get your variable isolated by itself. Get your variable on the side by itself. Okay, so there's two ways to do it. Okay, depending on if you have multiplication or division or adding and subtracting. In our case here, we have adding and subtracting. So I've got a positive 25 on this side. I've got a positive 25 on this side. And I want to bring it over to here. Okay, I want to bring it over to this side. What do? Whatever operation is on this side in front of the number, I have to do the opposite to get it over here. So I'm going to subtract 25 and subtract 25. If I do one thing to one side of the equation, I have to do it to the opposite side of the equation. Okay, so 25 minus 25 is 0. It'll cancel it out. I'm still left with negative x equals 15 minus 25. So now we got to go back into our integers, the pre-algebra stuff, which would be negative 10. Okay, so I have negative x equals negative 10, but I want to solve for x. I don't want to solve for negative x. So what do? Divide each side by a negative 1 in this case, and we find that x equals 10. Okay, and if we plug it back in, 25 minus 10 is 15. Same thing down here. Okay, I'm going to subtract 25 from each side, subtract 25 from each side, bring down, this time it's a positive x, 35 minus 25, and again, my answer is a positive 10. So, if I have adding and subtracting going on, and I want to get my variable alone, all right, so again, let's look at another one. A plus 7 equals 10. Okay, I want to get a by itself. This is a positive 7, so I'm going to subtract 7 from each side, and I'm going to be left with 3. This will cancel out, so a equals 3. If it's a negative, negative a, let's say plus 7 equals 10. Okay. How do I solve this? Minus 7. Okay, from each side. Minus 7 from each side. I'm left with 3 here, and I have a negative a. Okay. Now, I don't want the negative, so again, to get rid of the negative, divide each side by -1, and you're left with a equals -3. Now, does that make sense? Well, if a is a -3, so a -3, and -3 is a positive, right? So if I put this in for a, I'm finding that -a, okay, so it's -3, a is -3, we solved it, plus 7, well, this becomes a positive and a positive, and that is 10. Okay, so if you end up with a negative variable, divide each side by -1. Okay, what if it's multiplication and division? All right, so that's our second type. All right, let's say we had 3b equals 9, or 3 over b equals 1, let's say. Okay. Here I'm multiplying 3 times b, which means to get it on the other side, I've got to divide. 3 divided by 3, 9 divided by 3. The b is left over. b equals 9 divided by 3, or 3. Down here, the b is in the denominator. I need it in the numerator. So what I do, and this is up to you, I multiply each side by b first. So that this cancels out and this comes up. So I'd be left with 3 equals 1b. And then I have something like this, and divide it by 1. Divide each side by 1, and therefore b equals 3. Let's do a couple more of those, just to show it again. Okay. 15z equals 45. Divide each side by 15 to isolate z by itself, because I'm multiplying. 45 divided by 15 is 3. Let's look at this one here. Let's do 15 over z equals 3. So what again I'm going to do, how I do it, is I multiply each side by z. Okay, so bring that like that. So I have 15 equals 3z. Then divide each side, like we did up here, by 3 to isolate. And I get z equals 5, like so. Okay. So that's working with simple algebraic equations. Let's look at a little bit bigger of a problem. Let's say we had something like this. 3x plus 3 equals 12. Okay. What if I have something like this? What do I do? What I have to do in a problem like this is distribute the 3 across the parentheses. Multiply the 3 across everything in the parentheses. Okay? So 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 3 is 9. So now I have my equation. And let's try this one out. Okay? This one's going to add both things that we just did. So, first of all, I got to try to isolate x. The first thing you do, leave this alone if there's a variable in front of your, or a number in front of your variable, and work on this. So I'm going to subtract 9 from each side. Gone. That's left with 3. Bring the 3x down. Now I have 3x equals 3. What do? Got to isolate that x, divide each side by 3. And after I divide each side by 3, x equals 1. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, we'll do a couple more here, examples. Let's do one here. 5y, let's use a different variable. Minus 15 equals 25. Okay, first things first, leave the 5y by itself, even if you want to bring it down. What we're going to do first is add 15. Why? Because there's a minus. We're going to add 15 to each side. That'll cancel out. 5y, add them together, equals 40. Divide each side by 5. Y then equals 8. Okay. Let's do one with parentheses. Okay. Let's do one like this, just so you could see it. 2 times 3a plus 6 equals 18. Okay, so we got a little bit of complication, but we're going to multiply this by this and this by this. So 2 times 3a, 2 times 3 is 6, and we bring the a. 2 times 6 is 12. So if I'm multiplying a whole number by a variable number, I just multiply the two numbers in front. Okay? Equals 18. Now, what do? Subtract 12 from each side. Subtract 12 from each side. 6a equals 6. Isolate the a equals 1. And for right now, that is the algebra we're going to be doing. We'll get into more in-depth algebra later in the semester. Try the review sheets. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.